At the edge of the village, the day began like a soft breath, a silver line of dawn washing over the tiled roofs and thatch. The river uncurled under a low mist, and the wind stirred the poplars with a patient hand. A single window, a pane of quick glass set in lead, caught the first light and scattered it over the small shop where a tailor slept on a straw mattress, his dreams mended to quietness by the steady hum of the world. He woke to the hush of early hour, the taste of cool air, and the familiar weight of his woolen cloak across his shoulders. He did not keep a tape of numbers, no coiled strip marked with little ticks. In this age, the body was measured by memory and touch, by the wisdom of bones, by the span of fingers and the width of a thumb. He had his hands and he had the stars, steady points to steer by, both of them faithful. Cloth was a language he had learned before he learned his letters. Patterns were stories that flowed through him when he closed his eyes. He could picture a sleeve falling smooth, a shoulder eased with a narrow gusset, a hem that met the earth without fuss. He knew how a garment breathed with a person, how it needed to follow their work, their songs, their seasons. He rose, stoked the embers into a low fire, set a small kettle for barley tea, and opened the shutters. The world outside was not simply distant scenery. It was the first page of the day's work, the feel of the wind telling him whether sleeves should be cut a little closer, whether cloaks should be lined with rough wool that drank up chill like a friend. The sky toward the east, pale as milk, promised gentle hours. In the churchyard, crows walked with soft black dignity. Far off, a thin bell smiled the hour into being. Imagine you are there, your feet on the worn plank floor, your breath slowing with the quiet morning. Every corner of the shop holds patient tools. Shears, their blades broad and heavy, wait like sleeping swans. A needle gleams in a felt cushion, the light slipping over its eye. A lump of chalk, rubbed to a soft edge, rests in a little bowl beside beeswax. A wooden square leans against a bench, notched along one side by years of service. On a peg by the door, a loop of cord, linen string knotted here and there, hangs like a necklace with secret meaning. He touches the cord with a thumb. Each knot remembers a person. The miller's round chest, a knot there. The baker's clever wrist, a knot here. The blacksmith's shoulder, set further along. It is not numbers he stores, but shapes and proportions. The way a gait hints at a need for more ease in the thigh, the way a laugh lifts the ribs and asks the seam not to pinch. He can call to mind the warmth in each handshake, the way cloth should comfort that warmth and not press it flat. He sits cross-legged upon his low bench by the window, a tailor's perch that keeps him close to the light and above the dust on the floor. He rubs his palm along the grain of wood, feeling old. Vows in it. An apprentice, only a lad still, with ink-dark hair and a patient mouth, will come soon. The boy's eyes carry a hunger for knowledge that does not rush, but stays like the steady pull of a river. Together they will hold cloth to the morning and listen to what it wants to become. There is a kindness in starting slow. He sips his tea. He thinks about cloth as time folded upon itself. A sheep grazed a hillside last spring. A shepherd hummed. Hands sheared fleece. Hands washed it in the river where water sighed all winter. Someone carded it. Someone spun it. One breath to the next. Turn, draw, twist, wind, until thread was born out of patience. On the loom, warp and weft crossed. Like footpaths, the shuttles flight, a small bird darting through the hours. The cloth before him has walked a long way already. Now it waits for its last journey into shape. Without a tape measure, nothing is missing. What matters is touch, the whisper of cloth against the skin, the remembered feel of a thumb width below the throat for the fall of a collar. He holds his own hand span over the cloth, a known distance lived in muscle and old habit. He marks, lightly with chalk, not a number but a small crescent, like a moon borrowed for a seam. He listens to the house, the breathing of wood and wool, the hush of dawn that widens into day. Needlework is a form of prayer, his master once told him. Not a prayer of words, but of steady motion. In and out. In and out. The mind grows quiet. Around it, things that troubled in the night smooth themselves down like the nap of cloth brushed the right way. Even the pains of life, the ache of parting, the worry of lean fields, find gentler edges here. A good garment cannot save anyone, but it can make it easier to bear the weather. It can honor the body that must walk through time. He arranges the fabric, strokes it as one smooths the brow of a friend. He thinks of the woman who will wear this gown, a brewer's wife with quick hands. Her children tug at her skirts, sour mash stains her sleeves. She laughs with the morning, but by evening her feet are tired. The gown will not be fussy. It will be strong and forgiving, with hidden reinforcement at the elbows, generous gauze to give a swing of freedom, and seams felled, so the inside is as neat as the outside. Dignity is not a luxury. It is a right that the hand can build, stitch by stitch. The stars are not visible now, but he remembers where they were last night, cold and bright above the church spire. He recalls the way his master once pointed upward and said, "We all measure by something bigger than ourselves. For you, let it be care." He smiles, sets the chalk aside, and threads his needle with flax that he draws through beeswax to keep it patient and strong. The day begins in earnest. The river hums. The wind slips under the sill, tasting of meadows. And the tailor, with no tape at his belt, sets out to measure a life by hand. The light comes to the bench as a friend might, gently, without knocking, laying a gold hand across the worn plank and the folded cloth. The tailor loves this time. He knows the speech of wood and leather, the soft, close language of wool. He sits cross-legged, a position that gathers the body into stillness. From here, the world is both near and far. The lane outside with its cart ruts and whispering grass, the river's slow bend beneath the alders, the distant hill where the wind keeps an old promise of movement. Here, on this bench, the craft lives. The bench is a stage and a prayer mat, a school and an altar. His shears rest at his right hand like loyal geese, the broad blades heavy and capable, their edges shining with the careful love of oil and cloth. He knows their weight as he knows the weight of griefs and joys, and like those, he guides them with tenderness. The sound of their cut is a soft, ripe sound, a fruit giving under the knife. But he will not rush to it. Cutting comes after listening. He lays out the cloth. This bolt is a narrow weave, the width set by the loom where it was born. Its color is the color of river stones. Running his fingers along the selvage, he feels the firmness where the warp turns back upon itself, a small border of certainty. The apprentice arrives in a rush of quiet steps, breath a little fast from hurrying, voice hushed. The boy brings a basket with bread, a handful of dried pears, a wrapped wedge of cheese, the morning's small feast for later. The boy's eyes go first to the cloth. He too is learning to listen. "Sit," the tailor says, smiling. The boy sits cross-legged beside him. They share the bench without crowding, a lesson in itself. Hands move more wisely when they have room to move. The tailor shows him the chalk line for the bodice, the gentle arc where the seam will carry, weight and ease. He speaks little. Words are not the only way to learn. He places the chalk in the boy's hand so the boy can feel the angle. He adjusts the boy's wrist with a touch, a light correction like wind moving a reed into alignment. Imagine your own breath, slowing to match theirs. The tailor folds back the cloth to show the grain. He talks softly of truing the cloth, of how each thread carries the story of its path through the loom, and how a good garment honors that path. If you cut against the grain, the fabric resists, not in anger, but in physics, in the steadfast truth of how the world is woven. He shows the boy how to find right angles with the wooden square, how to mark a little notch where a gauze tip will meet its seammate like a friend arriving exactly on time. No numbers, not here. Only distances lived in the body. The tailor measures a sleeve by holding the cloth from his shoulder to his wrist, remembering the baker's wife's shorter arms. He nods to the apprentice and says, "Think of her reaching up for casks, reaching down for loaves. The sleeve must be a good neighbor to her days." The boy smiles and nods, absorbing not just the shape, but the kindness in the purpose. A garment is not a sentence. It is a companion. On the bench, tools gather around them like birds at a quiet pond. Needles, some fine as eyelashes, some stout enough for heavy seams. A small cup of pins made by a smith, quick with wire. Beeswax, warm and scented, ready to smooth the thread. A thimble, cup of domed metal with little wells like a field of stars, fits the tailor's finger as naturally as nail and knuckle. And there, against the window frame, a smooth stone for pressing seams when the iron is not warm, its surface burnished by the soft history of many garments. The tailor threads the needle, bites the end of the flax to make a clean taper, and draws it through the eye. He does not count, not in numbers, but his hands count in a different way. Each stitch a syllable in a poem he has recited every day of his working life. Backstitch for strength where force will live. Running stitch where the cloth will hang and breathe. Overcast to tame raw edges. He shows the boy how not to pull too hard, how to let the cloth keep its own desire to rest. A tight stitch can be brave or cruel. One seeks the first and avoids the second. At the midday, they rest, looking toward the lane where a dog sleeps under a cart, and the sun lights the dust like kind gold. They break bread. The tailor tells a story of his own master, a man with a voice as soft as wool. Once, he says, he made a cloak for a traveler who never stayed in one town for more than a season. The cloak was cut with extra breadth at the shoulders and lined with a thin layer of warmth, not too heavy for summer. The traveler said the cloak felt like a road that did not ask for hurry, and that he slept under it as under a sky. The apprentice listens. Stories are also measures, lines by which the heart finds shape. The afternoon settles in quiet, a deeper light, a warmth where dust dances as if following some old tune. The tailor cuts only what he must. Curves are drawn with the chalk like crescent moons, and the shears sing through them with trust. He lays pieces together to see how they speak to each other. Two gauze mirror one another. A panel awaits its partner. A sleeve turns like a question into an answer. The bench gathers their day into itself like a river holding reflections. At the end of the day, he and the boy set their work aside with care, covering it with clean linen to keep the night's dust from it. He cleans the shears with a rag oiled with linseed. He smooths the cord that hangs at the door, touching each knot with a gratitude that has no boast in it. The bench by the window agrees with him silently. Tomorrow will bring other light, other cloth, the same patience, the same quiet delight of making shape out of the generous plainness of the world. When the tailor steps into the cool of the guild hall, he glances at the iron rod mounted to the wall, an official measure, an old authority. Each town keeps such a rod, and this one is the length that merchants call a yard or an ell, depending on the tongue and the trade. The rod shines with the touch of many hands. It is a reminder that while bodies differ, cloth is bought by a rule, and the world must agree where trade demands it. He does not quarrel with the rod, he nods to it, as to a cousin. It is good for buying and selling. But for living, for living, he trusts the whispering cord. The cord dangles from a peg when he returns to his shop, back into the light where dust turns and turns like patient snow. Linen spun fine, the string bears small knots, some raised, little grains, some flattened, each a memory tied into place. He takes it down and loops it around his neck. The cord, warmed by the skin, becomes more alive, and he thinks of the people whose shapes it holds. He learned long ago that to work without numbers is not to work without precision. It is to hold a different kind of precision, one made of story, of presence, of attention, paid with the whole heart. He unties a small loop at one end of the cord, a loop for hanging. The apprentice watches, curious. Today they will measure. A boy for his first winter tunic. The child is shy. He stands by his mother, looking at the tools with wide eyes. The tailor kneels to be smaller. He speaks the child's name in a voice as soft as a feather landing. The cord comes around the boy's chest, not tight, not loose, just so. He pinches the cord where it meets itself and ties a slip knot. He does the same around the waist, at the shoulder, from neck to wrist. Each knot is a note, music in chord form, a song about a growing child who will need room for next spring. Imagine, the tailor says to his apprentice, while the mother soothes the child with a hand through his hair, that you are collecting stories. Each knot is a story of where breath moves, where the body turns. The boy nods. He sees how the tailor's fingers do not rush. The cord does not argue. It flows around life's edges and takes their measure the way a river learns its bank. The ell-wand, the wooden measuring rod in the shop, is not forgotten. For cloth, they will count lengths against it, for the merchant expects such language, but the tailor's secret language is better suited to the person. He likes to remember how his own master measured him when he was an apprentice, around his bony chest, his thin wrist, his narrow shoulders, that the years later broadened. The cord will follow the boy's journey. Different knots tied each visit, old ones loosened to allow the shape to grow. When he sees the cord years later, many knots, many lives, he will recall the way laughter rounded one belly, the way prayer made one backbone proud. Back at the bench, the tailor lays the cord beside the cloth. He sets the new knots against chalk marks, not to mimic numbers, but to echo them in this other alphabet. He marks the width of the chest, adding ease. Ease is a kindness built into garments, a little breathing room that says, yes, life asks much of you, let this cloth give something back. He marks length, thinking of winter's reach-down calves, the way cold tries to find the unguarded places. He remembers the wind rushing along the river, lifting the thin hair at the nape of a neck, and he adds a half-hand's length to the hem. The apprentice asks about the cord's age. The tailor smiles. "It is older than your memory, younger than mine," he says. "He has made many cords. Sometimes they fray, and he splices them with care, or replaces them entirely with new linen. Sometimes a knot works loose. He reads the cord like an old scribe reads prayer lines, slowly, gratefully, allowing for human error, relying on the mercy of experience." The cord whispers to him as he marks and cuts, as water whispers next to a bank of reeds. It does not need to be loud to be sure. Imagine the sound of the shears again, that tender bite as he shapes the pieces to the cord's news. The boy will have a tunic that allows him to run. The hem will sit above his ankle so he does not trip in snow. The sleeves will narrow at the wrist so they do not flop into soup or flame. The neck will open with a slit that can be tied with a small woven braid, neat and good against the cold. The tailor sees it all, the boy in his new tunic, a bit braver now, a bit more himself within the day's weather. The ell-wand gets its turn. They measure the cloth's length along the rod, both for record and habit. The apprentice notes it in a small book, not numbers alone, but words describing colour and weave, the feel under the fingers. "Words are also measures," the tailor says, chuckling. "Some day you will read back your own words and remember the cloth through them." The apprentice writes with tongue between his teeth in concentration. Afternoon drift. Light turns warmer, deeper, as if the sun is moving through honey. The cord, coiled now with new knots, hangs once more on its peg. The boy leaves with his mother. A promise in the tailor's voice to finish by the second bell on market day. The shop is quiet again. The tailor runs his hands over the pieces he has cut and stacked, murmuring encouragement. He will baste them together with long, easy stitches, a first conversation. Then he will listen to what the cloth says back when it hangs. You cannot force cloth to be what it is not, but you can help it find its best way. He thinks of night and stars, of Orion pulling across winter skies, of the cold that comes with them, and of the warmth given by well-made things. The cord will not show on the finished garment, but it will be there in every seam. He smiles at this. How often the best helpers go unseen, how often the quietest things hold all the shape. Before a garment there is cloth. Before cloth there is thread. Before thread the sheep and the flax field and the hands. The tailor honors this order with his eyes closed for a moment at the start of the day, a stillness that lets gratitude rise like steam from a warm cup. He thinks of spring's small lambs tumbling in sunlight, of flax flowers like chips of sky fallen on the earth, of carders and spinners lifting long strands into the turning world. Imagine the river again, its voice low and steady, along its banks fuller's work, pounding cloth in troughs to make it thick and true, beating water into wool until the fabric grows tight as a promise. The mill's wheel turns, water caught and released in a rhythm older than bells. The tailor listens from his doorway sometimes, hearing in that thrum the deep heartbeat of his craft. When he takes in a bolt of cloth from the fuller, he smells. The river again, leaf and stone cold and clean. He knows cloth by touch. A narrow weave speaks differently than a broad one. Some cloth falls like sleep, all liquid drape. Some holds its shape like a good friend standing firm. Some asks for a lining to soften its prickly honesty. He works with wool for warmth, with linen for breath in summer, with blends where merchants have mixed warps and wefts for price and need. Dye breathes another layer of story, madders red, woads blue, welds yellow, colours that the sun blesses at the window and that firelight returns from shadow at night. He remembers a winter cloak he made years ago for a widow who kept bees. The cloak was thick and quiet, a walking hearth. Inside he stitched a little honeycomb pattern where only she would know it was there, a private kindness. The wear of that cloak taught him how cloth changes with a life. A pocket grew shiny where she tucked her hands. The hem frayed a little on one side where she always stepped off the threshold. He mended those places when she brought it back in spring, not as a sign of failure but as a sign of use, which is the truest honour a garment can receive. At his bench he places 2 pieces cut from a heavy charcoal wool. He runs a bone folder along the seam to press it before the iron warms, a small trick learned from a travelling tailor who had little fuel and great patience. He fingers the edge, feeling the give and resistance. Curves ask for little clips, so they lay flat. He makes them with care, never cutting too near the seam. He works by good light, but he can close his eyes and know by fingertip alone where a seam runs even and where it ripples and needs coaxing. The apprentice returns from an errand with a bundle wrapped in linen, small buttons carved from antler, a packet of dyed thread, a length of braid. They lay the treasures out like small moons on the bench. Not every garment has buttons. Many use ties, loops, or lacing. The tailor chooses what will suit the life of the wearer. For a shepherd, a tie that can be mended in the field. For a merchant's wife, a neat row of buttons that lie like a path of pebbles down a bodice. For a child, something that will not easily fall open to the wind. They talk of the weaver's craft while they work, how a beat too hard can tire the cloth, how too loose a beat leaves gaps that cold will find. The apprentice has visited the Tauxine loom house and speaks of the clack and rush, the shuttles singing like swallows across the warp. The tailor nods, delighting in the boy's interest. He reminds him that to cut is to collaborate with all those who came before. Pride has no good seat at this bench. Humility does. As afternoon leans toward evening, the tailor sets a pot of charcoal on the hearth and rests his iron upon it. The iron is shaped like a bird, and indeed, some call it a goose. He understands the name when he lifts it. It has the beauty of a creature that once knew air. He tests the heat against a scrap, finds it warm enough, and presses the seams with firm, sliding strokes. Steam lifts like exhalation. The wool relaxes under the iron, giving up little tensions and lying. Smooth as dusk on a meadow, he has not forgotten the forest, though he seldom goes there. Its shadow is in his work as surely as the river's voice. The wood of his bench grew in that shade once, drinking the rain. The dyer's sticks for stirring vats came from that world. The handle of his shears. The chair where the apprentice sits. He feels the tree still in them, patient, willing, long-suffering. Clothes, he thinks, are a kind of forest in their own right, a shelter where weather hushes its voice. When the day cools, he covers the work again, mindful of moths and ash. He thinks again of cloth as time. In the morning he will baste sleeves. He will set a collar. He will lay braid along a hem like a small river at the edge of a field. The river outside murmurs, and the stars prepare themselves above the roof ridge. His hands are tired but not aching. It is the good tiredness that comes of shaping something useful from the world's generous plainness. Evening brings the flicker and hush of firelight. Shadows move softly along the walls, and the glow warms the small shop like a held breath. Tonight the brewer's wife returns for her fitting. She arrives with a child asleep on her shoulder, and her smile is the bright, simple light of someone who has worked and is content with the honest fatigue of it. The apprentice lays a clean blanket over the bench. The tailor hangs the gown, half-made, where firelight can find it, and turn its wool into ripples of rivered grey. Imagine you are there, in the warm amber pool of that room. Outside, the wind combs the trees with slow fingers. The village decline into hush. A spoon knocks a pot somewhere in the lane. A dog turns twice and sighs into the straw. The brewer's wife lifts the sleeping child to the apprentice's arms. He makes a nest on a chair with her cloak and keeps watch, his eyes tender. The woman stands with her back straight, and the tailor brings the gown to her as if offering a quiet song. He slides the sleeves over her arms, the wool brushing her skin like soft leaves. He closes the front with a few pins, careful, and steps back to see where the cloth would like to live. He does not argue with it. He coaxes. He touches the shoulder seam. Yes, a finger's breadth to be let out here, so the arm can move beneath. A weight of casks. He notes the fall of the skirt. Good, generous, but a touch long at the front where she steps quickly all day. He watches her breathe. He marks with chalk where the bodice wants less hold, where a dart would be unkind. The cord hangs on its peg, not needed now, its information already carried in the half-made shape. The tailor uses his hands as the sure measure they are. He slides, fingers under the fabric, and finds the body beneath, all muscle and work. He asks her to lift one arm, then the other. She laughs, soft and honest. "You know my days," she says. "I see them," he replies, and they smile. The apprentice stands near with pins cupped in his palm like seeds. The tailor speaks to him quietly. "You see how the seam curves here? It is not the straight that fits the living. A small arc, and the cloth will forgive more." He shows the boy how to angle a pin so it holds without stabbing, how to mark, with chalk as light as a moth's footstep. "Cloth takes what it is given," he says. "Give it kindness, and it will return it." When the adjustments are set, the brewer's wife turns before the little mirror of polished metal, less mirror, than gleam, and sees in the blur a promise of herself at ease. She nods. The child stirs and sighs. The apprentice sways, soothing. Fire settles too, sinking toward embers. The tailor removes the pins, eases the gown away, and sets it upon the bench like a sleeping thought. They speak quietly for a moment, of the harvest, of the river's mood, of the new apprentice at the smithy who sings while he hammers. The tailor listens, the way a needle listens when it searches the next place to enter, the way a river listens to its banks. Lives intersect and then drift. A good garment meets a life where it needs to be met, and moves with it, not against it. After they leave, the shop is warm with the impression of their presence. He sits and takes up his needle. He lets out here and takes in there, undoing basting, with a flick and setting new seams with tiny, patient backstitches. He hums an old tune his mother sang at night, a tune about a ship, about a home, about stars that know many names. The needle serviceably bites the cloth, emerges, bites again. The tailor's breath is slow, unhurried. Firelight moves across his hands like water over pebbles. Outside, the wind in the trees deepens to a gentle, steady hush. The river keeps its low counsel. The sky notices that it is time to soften its gaze. The tailor finishes his day with a prayer without words, a gratitude for cloth, for hands, for the simple gift of making shelter out of thread and will. He covers the gown with its linen friend and places his tools in their places, each small thing good under his notice. If your own eyes grow heavy here, you may let them. If your breath finds a slower tide, trust it. The same fire that softens wool softens worry, and the same quiet that settles over the lane can settle over your heart, as if a kind cloak were being set upon your shoulders and gently smoothed fold by fold. Morning pulls him out along the road. The tailor walks with a basket on his back and a purse of coins, small and sufficient, tied inside his tunic. The market calls with its bright tongues, criers, hawkers, donkey brays, the tint of ironware, the soft debate of hens. Air is full of hay and leather, of herb and salt, of dyed wool dried on lines like flags of the stout daily nations. Under the market's noise runs the river's same old song, a patient bass note. He goes for shears ground to a new edge, for linen thread and a fresh block of chalk, for braid bright as a small stream in sun. He greets the dyer whose hands are blue to the wrists from woad. The dyer jokes that the sky itself will bargain for cloth today. He nods to the fuller hauling damp lengths to the cart, the cloth smelling of river and hard work. He exchanges gossip with the spinner who spins as she walks, distaff under her arm, drawing out twist and fate with equal solemnity. He hears news of a marriage, of a loss, of a child with a fine singing voice. At the market cross, a man sells ironware, tools that gleam with value. The tailor hefts a second iron, its bird body smooth, and imagines the press of it along a seam. He weighs coins in his hand, thinks of winter coming, thinks of the care that heat can give. He buys it and feels his bench thanking him already, in some language of wood on iron. He does not hurry. The road is honest under his feet, packed earth that remembers feet by the thousands. At one stall, a woman sells small skeins of silk, expensive, delicate, less practical than what he needs, but beautiful all the same. He buys a length the color of dusk for a binding on a wedding gown he hopes to sew in the spring. Beauty has a place. It is not always separate from need. Sometimes it is need's tender expression. He finds the cloth merchant, a man with eyes like crows, clever, sharp, not unkind. They speak of weights and weaves, the tailor's fingers doing half the talking as they walk along bolts and fold, back edges to test drape. They stand near the official measure, a rod affixed to the stall, and the merchant calls out lengths while the tailor nods. This is the language your purse understands, the tailor thinks. A fair language, a necessary one. But in his mind, alongside each L, there is a face, a home, a season. Imagine how the wind moves between stalls, lifting strands of spun flax accidentally undone, teasing them into light. The sun turns around the square slowly. Children dart and dodge chasing a hoop. A pilgrim sings under his breath and sells little pewter badges. The bell rings noon, and the crowd inclines to shade and bread. The tailor sits with his back against sun-warmed stone, eats an apple, drinks from his flask, and watches clouds pass like white ships, forever patient in their voyage. On the walk home, his basket heavier, the fields speak to him of fabric. Barley stands like a crowd, listening to a quiet speaker. A fallow patch sleeps, dreaming its own green dream. The hedges hold the last berries, dark and sweet. A hawk wheels and tilts. The world repeats itself in gentle ways, row on row, thread on, thread day into night into day. He thinks of measures again, of how a man might think a measuring tape is a kind of certainty, but he does not crave it. He has the cord, he has how the air feels on his skin before snow, he has a pocket of momentary warmth when he cups his hands and breathes on them, and he knows the length of a cuff that will keep that warmth a little longer. By the time he reaches his lane, the light has moved into afternoon, sweet and gold, soft on the stone. The apprentice waits by the door, eager, pointing to a small triumph in the stitching he has done, a seam set flat, neat as a line of swans on water. The tailor praises him without measure. The boy beams, and the praise does its good modest work, travelling down into the hands where skill grows. They set the new iron on the hearth, they set the silk on a shelf where its colour comforts them when days grow grey. They lay fresh thread in a jar, chalk in a bowl, the new shears on a cloth like a cradle. The shop is richer not for luxury, but for readiness. The tailor feels a happiness that is not loud. It is the joy of being equipped to meet tomorrow with kindness. Evening brings a bell that swings above the guild hall, not grand but sure. Its voice is of bronze and old vows, of hands pledged to good work and fair dealing. The tailor washes his hands, combs his hair with fingers dampened from a bowl, and walks toward town where the guild meets under beams heavy with smoke scent and years. The apprentice comes too, eyes bright. He will watch and learn the ways of men and women who live by making. Inside, candles gather the faces. Carpenters, smiths, coopers, weavers, fullers, dyers, and his own fraternity of tailors sit shoulder to shoulder. There is bread and ale, laughter without boast, the comfortable quiet of people who understand the need for care more than the need for show. They speak of prices and weights, of the official measure on the wall, of a weaver who stretched his cloth to cheat the rod and must make amends. They speak of apprentices' progress, of the coming winter's fairs, of a widow who needs help with a roof and will have it by week's end. He listens more than he speaks. He likes how the bell above is answered in voices below. He takes in a story from an older tailor about a garment made for a lord who wanted fashion above function and who came back wet and cold from the hunt, less dignified for it. The older tailor laughs gently and says, "Comfort is not less noble than appearance, if you will be out in rain." Heads nod. They talk then of patterns old and new. Some swear by rectangles and triangles, the old shapes that waste little and fit many with a little coaxing. Others speak of curved pieces that hug the body closely, a newer practice that takes more skill and more chance. The tailor listens and thinks both have their place. He has seen garments laid in graves, dug up after long sleep, the stitches still neat in the darkness where the body's outline once pressed. He has run his finger along a seam made by someone long dead and felt a living kinship, needle to cloth, breath to breath. He thinks of legacy. He thinks of his apprentice, of the quiet joy of teaching something that will outlast his own hands. Imagine the hall's warmth, the smell of beeswax and wood and wool, the murmured prayers at the close for safety and fairness. The guild is not only about rules, it is about memory and belonging, about the way work is improved when watched over by love. When the bell's last note finishes, evening has set fully, and the stars regard the town as they regard the fields. A slow, generous gaze. He and the apprentice walk home under those stars. The boy asks questions about the talk of patterns. The tailor answers with images. "Think of a garment as a house you can carry," he says, "a house made for wind, for work, for breath." Sometimes a house is made of straight lines. Sometimes a house is round and curved. What matters is whether the house is kind. The boy smiles and looks up. He tries to count a string of stars and gives up happily. Numbers have their place. Wonder has its own measure. They return to the small shop whose door knows their hands. The bench lies quiet, waiting. The night has a patient rhythm he trusts. He sleeps with ease, knowing morning will come, and with it a chance to rise and measure a life again by touch and care. Patterns. Learned by heart. There are patterns in his head as steady as the river's flow. He remembers the shapes of sleeves as if they were lullabies. He knows how a gusset, small square of cloth, faithful and bright, carries grace into a tight place. How a gore, tall triangle, generous and polite, gives a skirt or tunic the freedom to move like wheat in wind. He knows bodice curves and necklines, how to cut a collar that lies without scolding the throat, how to make a cuff that greets a hand as an equal. He draws on the cloth now with chalk, a quiet geometry alive to the human. This is not mathematics for the sake of sums. This is the geometry of kindness. Lines curve where bodies curve. Width comes where bodies widen. Length comes where a life demands it. At the back, for those who bend in fields. At the front, for those who walk swiftly in town. He puts his hands flat and feels through the fibers a record of someone else's labor, and he commits himself again not to waste it. Imagine, he says to the apprentice, that a pattern is a map, but it is a map you carry within you. You will add paths as you learn more. You will forget some that lead nowhere. You will keep those that bring you and your clients home. He shows the boy how to fold the cloth so that pieces mirror, and how to mark tiny notches where seams will meet like friends who already know each other's handshakes. He thinks of how he learned, not from books, though there are a few, mostly for those who dress lords in complications. He learned from watching, from doing, from making mistakes and mending them. He learned that mending is not failure, it is the craft's proof of love. He learned that a well-set sleeve is like a well-placed word. It turns and lifts and lets the body say what it needs to say without constraint. He cuts a set of gauze now, their long edges straight, their short tops waiting to meet the skirt. He cuts a gusset for an underarm, that small hero, that makes reaching possible. He cuts a facing for a neckline and a reinforcement for the place where a tie will be tugged day after day. He is not stingy and he is not extravagant. He is careful in the way the river is careful, always moving, always finding a way that is true to itself. In summer, patterns ask for openness. He remembers cutting linen cool and smooth and how the pattern needed to let air through, how it needed to dry quickly, to shake off dust, to welcome water. In winter, patterns lean into shelter. He remembers the heavy cloak shapes and the hoods with long points that can be wrapped around a face when the wind wants to peel the skin. Spring and autumn ask for compromise, for layers that are patient. In the morning chill and yielding, in the afternoon soft heat. The apprentice lays out pieces as if setting a table. He pairs gauze with panels, gussets with sleeves, facings with necklines. He basts stitches with long, visible threads as if drawing temporary roads for a festival. The tailor watches, corrects, praises, adjusts. The boy is learning the pattern, within the secret shape of the craft that has nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with how often you look, how gently you touch, how willing you are to be corrected by what is before you. Imagine a forest of patterns in his mind, Not dense and forbidding, but sweet and varied, paths lit by shafts of sun. Some are ancient, rectangles and squares that waste nothing, born of necessity. Some are newer, thoughtful curves that flatter and follow. He walks among them when he cannot sleep, not to worry, but to soothe himself. He imagines placing his hand on a tree with a straight trunk and saying, "You will be a bench." He places his hand on a sapling with a supple turn and says, "You will be a hook, a handle, a hanger." He sees futures in shapes. He honors each shape. By afternoon, a new tunic hangs basted on the peg. He scans it with the eye he has earned, stern and tender. He smooths the seams, lifts the sleeves, looks at it as if it were a person he loves, almost but not yet itself. He takes up the needle again, no rush, no fret, and begins to make the temporary into the true. Backstitch, backstitch, the strong spine of his craft, small and regular as stars. Seasons turn like pages in a worn book, edges softened by 1,000 readings. Winter comes with its first low breath, the river rimmed in glass, the trees speaking in bare syllables. He lines cloaks then, the nice friction of wool on wool, and he pads collars to stand against the wind's persistent hand. His iron works more in winter, steam rising like spirit from the cloth. His fingers crack at the nails, and he rubs them with tallow at night as he sits by the fire, listening to its small conversations. He remembers losses as the year grows old. A child he dressed once for her first festival, quick feet silent in winter boots. Later, a gown in black for her mother when illness took her. The seam allowances inside were pressed as neatly as for any celebration, because dignity is never out of place. He stitched then with a lump in his throat and a steady hand. He knows that cloth cannot change fate, but it can cradle sorrow so the edges do not cut quite so sharply. Summer returns later with ringing insects and the river lazing, shoulder deep in sun. He makes linen shirts then, light and laughing, garments that want to be on a line with wind running through them. He loves how linen smells when pressed warm, a grass-sweet scent that reminds him of fields and work and rest under trees. He makes shirts longer to soak sweat without shame, and he cuts necks a little open so air can speak to skin. In spring, births and weddings. He puts silk aside for a binding, rare, small blessings. He laughs with brides who speak of love in bright riddles and with grooms who speak in silence, all certainty tucked under their ribs. He adds embroidery sometimes, simple and strong, a little vine along a cuff, a leaf at a collar's edge. He does not announce his work loudly to the outer world. He waits for the world to discover it when the time is right. Autumn sings with apples and smoke. He patches elbows for the scholars who lean on their work. He reinforces knees for children who kneel to gather nuts. He adds secret stitches into hems for luck, not superstition, but gratitude with a needle. He believes luck often arrives dressed as care. He teaches the apprentice to set aside scraps for mending, sorted by colour and weight, a small library against future need. Imagine the seasons as garments themselves. Winter, a cloak heavy with quiet. Spring, a tunic bright with promise. Summer, a shirt clean and unafraid. Autumn, a vest that remembers warmth and prepares for cold. The tailor moves among them with hands that have learned patience through repetition. He does not speed through, he does not lag. He works as trees grow, slowly, surely, beautifully if you are paying attention. When storms come at night, rattling shutters and urging the river into a new mood, he lights a candle and sets it where it will not argue with draught. He checks that the silk is safe, that moth traps are set, that the iron is cooled and resting. He thinks of his own master, gone these many years, whose voice still visits when stitches go awry. He misses him with a sweetness that does not ache anymore. The seam between then and now has been pressed flat by time and care. He turns to his bed at last, the bench empty, save for a folded garment ready to meet its life. The stars outside hold their positions, generous and constant. He is an old friend to their distance, and they to his small, bright shop. In the morning he will rise again and measure with his hands, his heart, his memory. He has never needed a tape to know how to help a body speak itself to the day. In the pale blue before dawn, he wakes with a thought as clear as a bell. The apprentice is ready. He sits up, pulls the blanket to his waist, and looks toward the window where the first light gathers like wool in a carder's comb. The boy is not a boy now, not really, his face thinned of childhood, his hands calloused, his eyes steady as a river stone. He has stitched grief into hems and joy into collars. He has learned to mark with chalk that barely touches. He has learned to listen when the cloth speaks and to hush when pride wants to boast. The tailor rises, lights the fire, warms water for tea, and lays out the tools on the bench: shears, needle case, chalk, thimble, wooden square, iron, and the cord, his old companion, lifted from its peg with a tenderness that catches him by surprise. The string has knotted memories of many lives. He can read them like an old storybook, see faces in each knot, hear laughter, and see tears. He smooths the fray at one end and thinks of all the distances it has carried without numbers, all the shapes it has remembered without boasting. When the apprentice arrives, the tailor does not begin with a speech. He lays the cord in the young man's hands. "A gift," he says, "and a trust." The young man looks down, then up, eyes shining in a way that makes the tailor's own eyes cloud and clear in quick succession. "I thought," the apprentice says softly, "that I would have to make my own someday." The tailor smiles. "You will, but begin with this. Add your knots. Untie mine as they cease to fit the living. Carry what you must. Let go of what you should. The body changes, so does the craft. The cord's worth is not in its age, but in the attention you give with it." He shows the apprentice again, one last time, how to loop the cord without tightening, how to mark with the smallest pinch, how to look not only with eyes but with kindness. He speaks of ease and breath, of winter hems and summer cuffs, of the curve that forgives and the straight that steadies. He speaks of the way wind hunts for the unguarded place, and how a good garment invites wind to pass like a guest who is welcomed, fed, and sent kindly on its way. Imagine standing beside them, the room a pool of gentle morning. The river outside is slow and silver. A bird clatters briefly and then is still. The tailor feels inside him a seam come smooth, past and future, meeting without friction, the present pressed, warm and even between them. He thinks of how hands taught him, of how hands taught those who taught him, a long line of fingers stained with dye and wax, and the world's work, the first client of. The day arrives, a man with a kind face and a laugh that comes quickly. The apprentice greets him, offers him a chair, and lifts the cord without looking back. He measures with reverence and ease, his fingers sure, his movements quiet. The tailor watches from the bench, a weight lifting from his chest that he did not know he carried. He does not correct. He nods once when the apprentice's eyes flicker toward him. The young man smiles with relief and a bit of new pride. They set to work together one more time, chalk making moons along wool, shears whispering through fibers, needle marking a road. The day passes like a river, steady, not hurrying, not delaying. At noon, the tailor steps outside and stands for a time with his face to the sun, letting the warmth touch the places where the cold of worry used to live. He breathes deeply, smelling bread in the lane, smoke from a dozen hearths, the tide of life that has always been his neighbor. In the afternoon, he takes down a small bundle wrapped in linen from a high shelf. Inside is a paper. He has a few rare things on which his own master wrote a blessing long ago, not in complicated words, but simple ones. May your hands be patient. May your heart be even. May your work be shelter. He reads it quietly, then folds it again and sets it back with the other small, important things that need no boasting. Wood shavings from the bench when it was new, a button carved by a friend, a scrap of silk the color of dusk. Evening descends like a kind cloak. The apprentice closes the shutter with care, latching it so that wind will not pry. They cover the day's work. They bank the coals. The tailor picks up the cord from the apprentice's place and hangs it on the peg by the door. It looks right there, as it always has, and also new in a way he loves. He rests a hand upon it briefly, as one might lay a hand on the shoulder of a child who is sleeping. He speaks then, finally. You will find that you do not need to count as others do. You will count by breath, by kindness, by the turn of a shoulder in firelight, by the way the river cools a summer afternoon. You will measure by the stars and your hands. The apprentice nods, his face calm and bright. The tailor sits and lets the room quiet around him. He has given what he can give, and he has been given much in return. The river's voice deepens for night. The trees speak in their slow language. The stars keep their places, and he, tired in a sweet way, prepares to sleep. If you are ready now, you may close your eyes. Imagine the gentle weight of a cloak being set across you. Imagine a cord tied with all the careful knots of your days, not tight, not loose, just so. Your breath measures your life as the river measures the shore. The wind smooths your brow, the fire remembers your name. Rest in the old kind house that is your body. Rest while the stars regard you with a gaze that never hurries and never leaves.